A peaceful morning turns into a scene you won't believe. When a little girl faces cruelty, two unexpected heroes step in. What really happened on that sidewalk? Watch to find out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story moved you. The sun was just beginning to rise over the quiet suburban streets of Los Angeles. The sky burned with soft orange light, casting a warm glow across manicured lawns and silent sidewalks. Birds chirped lazily as the city slowly awoke. Jogging along one of the winding streets was John Cena, dressed in a light gray athletic shirt, navy shorts, and well-worn running shoes. His pace was steady, his breath even. Sweat clung to his brow, but there was peace in his face. This was his sanctuary. Far from flashing cameras and screaming fans, just him and the road beneath his feet. He took a deep breath of the crisp morning air, appreciating the calm. It was the kind of morning that made him feel like the world wasn't such a bad place after all. But that feeling didn't last long. Just as he turned a corner near a small local park, a sound shattered the stillness. A woman's voice, loud and furious. "You blind, black little freak! You just ran over my foot, you stupid brat!" John stopped dead in his tracks. The rage in the voice sent a chill down his spine. It wasn't a simple argument, it was hate, sharp and raw. He followed the source quickly, his instincts kicking in. Just ahead, at the corner of the park's entrance, a small crowd was beginning to gather. Some stood in silence, others raised phones to film. In the middle of it all stood a white female police officer. Stout, red-faced, her eyes blazing with fury. In her right hand, she gripped a black rubber baton. Her chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, and she pointed down at a young girl. The girl looked no older than 10. She was black, frail, with her hair braided into neat little rows. She sat in a worn-out wheelchair, the left front wheel slightly tilted as if it had bumped something. She wore a bright pink t-shirt with an anime character printed on it, purple sweatpants, and mismatched shoes. One of her hands clutched the armrest of her chair, the other trembled slightly on her lap. She looked up at the officer with wide, frightened eyes, but there was defiance in them too. I didn't mean to," the girl stammered. "You were standing in the middle of the path. I didn't see—" The officer leaned down, practically spitting the words into the girl's face. "Don't give me excuses, you useless cripple. Maybe if your lazy ass had brakes, I wouldn't be limping now. Is that how you were raised? To plow into people like you own the damn street?" A gasp rippled through the bystanders. "I said, I'm sorry," the girl whispered. "Sorry doesn't fix my foot, you worthless little rat," the officer roared. "You're just another drain on taxpayers, a parasite with wheels." John felt his stomach turn. His fists clenched, but he waited, one step at a time. The girl swallowed her fear. "You're a police officer. You're supposed to protect people." The woman laughed, loud and bitter. "I am the law, sweetheart, and the law says I don't have to take lip from a broken mistake like you." And then, without warning, she struck. Her open hand whipped across the girl's cheek, snapping her head to the side. A few people cried out. Phones shook in the hands of those recording. Still, no one moved forward. No one tried to stop it. The girl blinked hard, tears starting to form, but she didn't cry. She turned her head back, slowly, face red from the slap. "You're not the law," she said, voice shaking. "You're just a pig in a uniform." The officer's face twisted into a mask of rage. She raised the baton with both hands. "I'll teach you to talk to me like that, you little monster." John stepped forward, but before he could intervene, another voice rang out behind him, deeper, thunderous, impossible to ignore. "Put it down." Heads turned. There, walking toward them with long strides, was Dwayne Johnson. He wore a white tank top stretched tight over his broad chest and black shorts. His arms were tense and his jaw was locked. He looked from the officer to the girl, then to the baton raised in the air. "I said," he repeated, "put it down. Now." The officer hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of the towering figure, but almost immediately her expression twisted again, this time with defensive pride. "You have no jurisdiction here," she snapped. "This is police business." "You're assaulting a child," Dwayne said coldly, "and threatening her with a weapon. That's not police business. That's criminal." Before she could respond, the sound of boots approached from behind her. 11 male officers, all white, emerged from the direction of the nearby patrol vehicles. They formed a line behind her, some with hands near holsters, others already holding batons or tasers. The message was clear. This wasn't just a rogue officer, it was a gang. Dwayne didn't flinch. John Cena stepped up beside him. The two men stood shoulder to shoulder in front of the girl in the wheelchair, between her and the wall of police. One of the men called out, "You two need to leave, now. You're interfering with police authority." John's eyes never left the little girl. "This girl ran over someone's foot. That's it. And you're acting like she pulled a gun." "She assaulted an officer," the female cop barked. "She barely weighs 70 pounds, Dwayne said. "You outweigh her by 200. And you hit her. We saw it. Everyone saw it." Phones were still recording. Tension hung in the air like lightning about to strike. One of the cops stepped forward, baton raised. "You're making a big mistake," he growled. "No," John said softly. "You already made it." For a moment, time stood still. The wind rustled the leaves of nearby trees. A bird chirped obliviously in the distance, and the heat of the early sun cast long shadows across the pavement. But, in the middle of it all, 12 armed police officers stood face to face with two men, John Cena and Dwayne Johnson, who refused to back down. Behind them, the little girl in the wheelchair clutched her stuffed rabbit, her cheek still stinging from the slap, her lips trembling not from fear anymore, but from rage. The female officer, red in the face and still gripping her baton tightly, looked from Dwayne to John and then back to her fellow officers. "They're obstructing an investigation," she barked. "Take them down." The order hung in the air. The other officers looked hesitant for a split second, but loyalty, or pride, overcame reason. One of them stepped forward with a stun gun. Another raised his baton. Dwayne moved first. With fluid precision, he sidestepped the baton swing, grabbed the officer's arm, and twisted it behind his back, sending the man crashing to the ground. John intercepted the officer with the taser, grabbing the device midair before it could fire, and disarmed the man with a quick, practiced motion. 3 more officers charged forward. Dwayne ducked one strike and delivered a devastating elbow to the ribs of a second officer, then swept the legs of the third. John caught a baton strike with his forearm, grimaced, and responded with a powerful shoulder thrust that knocked his attacker off balance and into the grass. The crowd gasped. Phones shook as they recorded what felt like a scene from an action film. But this was real. This was now. The woman officer screamed, "Get them! All of them!" 5 officers rushed in unison. Dwayne took a defensive stance in front of the wheelchair as one officer lunged at him with a baton. He blocked the swing, grabbed the man by the vest, and spun, throwing him over his hip and onto the pavement. Another tried to tackle him from behind, but John intercepted, slamming the officer into the hood of a nearby cruiser. The last 2 paused. One of them, gripping a baton with white-knuckled fists, looked around. at the unconscious or groaning bodies of his fellow officers, at the cameras, at the crowd, and then at the girl they'd all turned against. But it was too late. They were already on the wrong side of justice. John turned to the remaining officers. "This ends now. Back off." Breathing heavily, Dwayne pointed toward the girl. "She's a child. You came here with weapons. She came here with wheels." "She hit me first," the woman officer screamed, face contorted. She ran into me." "She barely touched you," Dwayne said coldly. "And you slapped her. You called her names I wouldn't use for my worst enemies. You're lucky we got here before you did worse." There was silence. The last two officers dropped their batons slowly to the ground. The crowd began to murmur louder now, angry but hopeful. Someone shouted, "We've got everything on camera." Another voice added, "We're not letting you get away with this." The female officer trembled with rage. "She's nothing. She's trash on wheels." That was when the girl finally spoke again, loud and clear. "My name is Liana. I'm not trash. I'm more human than you'll ever be." The moment hit everyone like a wave. A child in a wheelchair had stood up with words when grown men with weapons had failed with strength. Dwayne walked slowly toward the officer. "You hit a child. You threatened her with a baton. You sicked 12 officers on 2 unarmed men because your ego was bruised. Your badge is a disgrace." The officer backed away, but not before Dwayne reached for her baton and calmly took it from her trembling hands. "You're done," he said. The first sirens in the distance echoed closer now. Actual backup. Real investigators responding to reports from witnesses who had called 911 during the confrontation. Several squad cars pulled up at once. Uniformed officers stepped out, looking confused and alarmed at the scene before them. 8 of their fellow officers on the ground, bruised or groaning, 2 celebrities standing firm, and a little girl in a wheelchair surrounded by concerned bystanders. One of the newcomers approached, clearly in charge. He looked from John to Dwayne to the female officer. "What the hell happened here?" "We stopped an assault," John said calmly. Dwayne added, "And we have dozens of witnesses and video to prove it." As officers moved to assess the injured and question those involved, paramedics arrived to check on Liana. Her cheek was red and swollen, but she was conscious and calm. John crouched beside her. "Hey, you okay?" he asked softly. Liana nodded. "I was scared, but then you came." John smiled gently. "You were brave. We just helped." Dwayne approached and took her hand. "We're going to make sure no one ever touches you like that again." Liana glanced up at the 2 giants flanking her and smiled for the first time that morning. A few feet away, the female officer was being escorted to the back of a cruiser. The very system she thought protected her now turned its gaze inward. The same crowd that had watched in fear now cheered as the officer was taken away in cuffs. News vans began to arrive. Reporters rushed to set up cameras. Dwayne and John were offered interviews, but they refused. "This isn't about us," Dwayne said. "It's about her." Liana, now sitting in a fresh blanket provided by paramedics, looked up and whispered, "Can I tell my story?" One reporter hesitated, then nodded. The mic was handed to her. Her small hands trembled, but her voice did not. "My name is Liana," she said clearly. "I'm 10 years old. I was in an accident last year. A police car hit my mom's car. The officer was drunk. He didn't go to jail. My mom died, and I haven't walked since." The crowd went silent. "Today, another police officer hit me again. She slapped me. She called me names. She said I didn't matter, but I do. I matter." And I want everyone to know that just because someone wears a badge doesn't mean they get to hurt people. Not anymore. Cameras flashed, microphones buzzed, and a single tear slid down her cheek, not from fear, but from strength. Dwayne and John stood behind her, arms crossed, silent guardians of the truth. The world would be watching now. The videos spread like wildfire. Within hours, clips of the confrontation appeared on every social media platform, some shaky and vertical, others recorded in high quality by bystanders who had been too afraid to intervene, but brave enough to document. The hashtags #JusticeForLiana and #NoMoreBadgeAbuse trended worldwide. People weren't just angry, they were shocked. The image of a black girl in a wheelchair slapped by a white policewoman, followed by two of the world's most recognizable figures stepping in to protect her, ignited a firestorm of attention and debate. By that evening, national news networks interrupted regular programming. Talk shows, commentators, celebrities, and activists all weighed in. Some tried to spin the story, talking about escalation or use of force, but the footage made it undeniable. A child had been abused, and it took two men outside the system to stop it. Meanwhile, John Cena and Dwayne Johnson stayed out of the spotlight. They didn't give interviews. They refused publicity. They stayed with Liana. The hospital they brought her to was private, clean, and quiet. She was given a full checkup, scans for internal injuries, and immediate treatment for her swollen cheek. Her medical file, overlooked and half lost in public clinics, was reviewed by top specialists now. John sat beside her bed as she rested, the stuffed rabbit tucked in beside her. Dwayne paced slowly near the window, his arms folded across his chest. "She's strong," John said softly. "She's stronger than the most grown men I've met," Dwayne replied. "The way she looked that cop in the eye." John nodded, then looked over at Liana's chart. "You saw this?" Dwayne walked over and read silently. "Accident, mother dead, spinal injury, and the officer was never charged. Not even suspended," John said grimly. "In fact, promoted 2 months later. Internal review found no wrongdoing." Dwayne clenched his jaw. "We can't let this go." Later that night, while Liana slept, the two men sat with the doctor who had just finished examining her. He was a gray-haired man with tired eyes but a kind tone. "She's remarkably resilient," he said. "But the injury to her spine, with the right surgery and therapy, there's a chance she could regain some movement. Maybe not full walking, but better control, less pain, maybe even a walker someday." John's eyes lit up. "Why hasn't she had that treatment?" "She's on a public list. The kind of list that takes years. No insurance, no connections, no attention." Dwayne and John exchanged a look that needed no words. The next morning, they told Liana. She looked at them with a cautious hope. "But it costs a lot, doesn't it?" she asked quietly. "Like, a lot. "It's covered," John said simply. "Don't worry about that." "Is it because people are watching?" she asked. "No," Dwayne said, kneeling beside her. "It's because you deserve it." At the same time across town, the police department was in chaos. Half the precinct was suspended pending investigation. The female officer, whose name was now public, had been placed on administrative leave. Anonymous sources leaked emails, body cam footage, and old complaints, revealing that she had a history of violence and racial bias that had been ignored for years. Pressure mounted. The mayor called for a full investigation. Civil rights organizations mobilized. Crowds gathered outside the department demanding accountability. And through it all, the videos kept spreading. People analyzed every frame. When Liana looked into the camera and said, "I matter," Those two words became a rallying cry. Back at the hospital, Dwayne took a call and stepped outside. When he returned, his face was solemn but determined. "I spoke to someone in Washington," he said to John. "They want to talk, quietly, about police reform, about using this case as a symbol." John frowned. "Is that good or bad?" "Depends if they're serious." Later that day, John wheeled Liana outside for some fresh air. Paparazzi were kept at bay by security, but still, a crowd gathered at a respectful distance. Some held signs, "Protect our children," "End police terror," "Liana =, courage." One woman approached carefully. She held her own daughter's hand. "Can we say hi?" Liana looked at John, who nodded. The woman knelt. "I just wanted to say, you're brave, and my daughter wanted to give you this." The little girl handed Liana a small plastic bracelet made of beads. "It says hero," she whispered. Liana took it gently, eyes wide. "Thank you," she said. When they went back inside, Dwayne met them with news. "The mayor wants to meet with you," he said to Liana. "Me?" "She wants to hear your story in front of the city council. People are listening." That night, Liana couldn't sleep. She stared out the window, bracelet in hand. John sat nearby reading a file, and Dwayne stood at the far end of the room, speaking quietly on the phone. "I'm scared," she said aloud. They both looked up. "Of talking?" John asked. She nodded. "What if they don't believe me? Or say I made it up?" "They can't," Dwayne said. "There's proof, there's witnesses, and there's us. But I'm just me." John walked to her and crouched beside the chair. "You're not just you. You're Liana, the girl who stood up to a cop, the girl who spoke the truth, the girl who made the whole world listen." She looked at him. "Will you be there?" "Every step of the way," Dwayne said behind her. And with that, she nodded. She was ready. The next chapter wouldn't be a fight on a sidewalk. It would be a fight in front of the world. The council chamber was packed. Rows of seats were filled with reporters, activists, city officials, and citizens from every neighborhood of Los Angeles. Cameras lined the back wall, their red lights glowing. The buzz of whispered conversations echoed off the marble walls as people waited for the hearing to begin. In the center of the chamber stood a long curved table where the city council members sat. They wore stern expressions and carried folders stuffed with documents. At the front of the room, facing them, was a single microphone stand and a reserved seat for the next speaker. Liana's name was printed on a white placard in front of it. She entered through a side door, wheeled in by John Cena, with Dwayne Johnson walking just behind them. Liana wore a clean new outfit, a sky blue dress, and her hair neatly braided again by a nurse that morning. She still had the beaded bracelet on her wrist. Her face was calm, but her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. The mayor, seated at the center of the council, tapped her gavel once. "This hearing is now in session. Today, we will hear testimony related to the events on June 2nd, regarding the assault of a minor by a uniformed officer. Our first speaker is the victim, Miss Liana Miller." John gently wheeled her forward. The entire room fell silent. All eyes were on her. She looked at the microphone, then up at the people watching. She took a slow breath. "My name is Liana," she said. "I'm 10 years old. I can't walk because a drunk police officer crashed into my mom's car. He didn't get in trouble. My mom died. I didn't." No one moved. "Since then, I've had to be strong. But last week I was rolling my chair down the sidewalk. I accidentally bumped into a police officer's foot. She called me horrible names. She said I was worthless. Then she slapped me." A gasp rippled through the room. "She tried to hit me again, but Mr. Cena and Mr. Johnson stopped her. I'm alive because someone stood up for me." She paused, her voice stronger now. "I used to think police were supposed to help people. I don't think that anymore. I think they help themselves. I think the badge makes some people feel powerful instead of responsible. That's not right." One of the council members leaned forward. "Liana, do you believe this was about race?" Liana stared at him. "Yes, if I looked like you, she wouldn't have hit me." A deep silence followed. John and Dwayne exchanged glances but said nothing. Liana didn't need help. The mayor spoke again. "Thank you, Liana. Your voice is heard here." After the testimony, other speakers followed. Civil rights lawyers, doctors, witnesses from the scene. Even a former police officer who described a culture of silence inside the department. The evidence piled higher with every passing minute. Years of ignored complaints, internal cover-ups, and favoritism. Public opinion was turning fast. Outside the building, a peaceful demonstration gathered. Hundreds of people stood with signs, many holding pictures of Liana. A massive banner was hung between two trees. No child should fear the badge. Back inside, the mayor made a motion. "Given the overwhelming evidence and the public interest, I propose a full investigation into the practices and personnel of the LAPD's 7th Precinct." The vote was unanimous. Later that evening, John and Dwayne sat with Liana in a quiet room. She had barely spoken since the hearing. She stared down at the floor, her hands folded again. "You did great," John said softly. "You were incredible," Dwayne added. Liana looked up. "Do you think it'll matter?" "It already does," John said, but Dwayne leaned forward. "It's a start. But real change takes more than speeches. Are you ready to keep going?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I want to do more." Dwayne smiled. "Then let's do more." The next morning, news broke that the female officer who assaulted Liana had been formally arrested and charged with multiple counts: child endangerment, assault, and abuse of power. The chief of police announced a resignation under pressure. Several officers who were part of the confrontation faced disciplinary action. For the first time in years, the city was holding its own accountable. John received a call from a journalist wanting an exclusive interview. He refused. So did Dwayne. Instead, they issued a joint statement. "This is Liana's story, not ours. We were witnesses, nothing more. The heroes are the ones who speak truth even when their voices shake, and the children who refuse to be silenced." The attention did not go away. Liana was invited to speak at schools, youth centers, and even a televised town hall. With each speech, she became more confident. She didn't want to be a symbol. She wanted to be a voice for other kids like her, for the ones who couldn't speak, for the ones who were too afraid. One day, she sat with John and Dwayne in a sunny courtyard outside the hospital, her new chair gleaming in the light. She looked up at them. "Do you think I'll ever walk again?" she asked. John shrugged. "I think you'll fly." Dwayne added, "You've already moved mountains." She smiled, then looked at her phone. A new message had arrived from a child in Detroit who had seen her video. It read, "Because of you, I told my teacher what happened to me. Thank you." Liana looked up, tears in her eyes. "Maybe I'm not done yet." The evening sky over Los Angeles was painted in deep hues of orange and purple as the city prepared for the annual Night of Change Charity Gala. This year, the event had taken on a deeper meaning. In the aftermath of the citywide reckoning brought about by Liana Miller's story, the organizers dedicated the gala to victims of injustice and the children whose voices had been ignored for too long. The event was hosted in a grand civic hall with towering windows, crystal chandeliers, and a long red carpet stretching from the curb to the entrance. Celebrities, philanthropists, politicians, and social workers arrived one by one, all dressed in their finest. But the attention of the cameras wasn't on the usual stars this time. It was focused on a small girl in a wheelchair being rolled out of a black SUV by John Cena. Liana was dressed in a white gown with silver embroidery. Her hair was done in tight braids wrapped into a crown. Her bracelet that read "Hero" was still on her wrist. Dwayne Johnson stepped out from the other side of the vehicle, wearing a sleek black tuxedo. Together, the three moved slowly along the red carpet, with camera flashes popping on all sides. But, unlike other appearances, this one wasn't about fame or glamour. It was about presence. About making sure Liana knew she belonged there as much as anyone else. Inside the hall, soft music played as people mingled and shared stories. A wall-sized screen showed footage from protests, speeches, and community work done in the past month. Liana's face appeared several times, speaking to students, meeting with families, comforting other children. Her voice had become a spark that lit dozens of other fires across the country. The host stepped up to the microphone. Tonight, we honor those who stood for truth. But more importantly, we honor those who spoke it when no one else would. Our final guest is someone who has reminded us what courage really looks like. Please welcome Miss Liana Miller. The spotlight shifted to the side of the stage where a ramp had been installed. As Liana was wheeled onto the platform, the entire hall rose in applause. Some clapped, others cried, and many simply stood in awe of the little girl who had changed the city. When the room quieted, Liana spoke. "When this all started, I didn't know anyone would hear me. I thought maybe the world was too loud for someone like me. I was wrong. You listened, you cared, and now we're here together." She paused to steady her voice. "But there are still more kids like me. Kids who are told they don't matter. Kids who get hurt and can't do anything about it. That has to change. I'm not the only one with a story. I'm just the one with a microphone tonight." She smiled. "And I promise I'll use it the right way." The crowd erupted in cheers. People stood, clapping, shouting her name. Flowers were brought onto the stage, and a plaque was presented to her that read, "For courage beyond measure." Backstage, after the event, Liana sat with John and Dwayne. The applause still echoed faintly through the walls. She held the plaque in her lap. "Do you think people really change?" she asked. Dwayne answered, "Some don't. But when enough people stand up, the ones who hide have nowhere left to crawl." John nodded. "You made them look in the mirror. That's more than most adults ever do." A knock came at the door. A young doctor entered, holding a medical folder. "I just got the final approval," he said with a smile. "Her surgery is scheduled. Full cost is covered. And we've got the best rehab team in the state ready to work with her." Liana blinked. "Really?" "It's happening," John said. "You're going to have a new chance." She looked down at her legs, then at her hands, and finally at the two men in front of her. "I'm not scared anymore," she whispered. Weeks passed. The surgery was long but successful. The first day she wiggled her toes, she cried. The first day she stood on a walker, she laughed so hard she couldn't breathe. John and Dwayne were there for every milestone, sometimes cheering, sometimes crying with her. News crews tried to follow her story, but Liana didn't want cameras anymore. She wanted to walk down the hallway of her school. She wanted to visit the playground again. She wanted to live, not perform, but her impact didn't fade. Her story became a case study in law schools. Her speech was used in civil rights classes. A scholarship was created in her name for children with disabilities who overcame injustice. And one warm spring day, Liana returned to the park where it all began. She walked slowly, with a cane beside her, her step shaky but her spirit steady. John and Dwayne walked behind her, not leading, just there in case she stumbled. She paused near the spot where she had once been struck. There was now a plaque on the sidewalk. It read, "In honor of Liana Miller, a child who reminded us that justice has no age and courage has no limits." She smiled and touched the stone. Then she turned to the two men and said, "Let's go. There's still more to fix." And together they walked on. One girl's courage changed everything. But the fight for justice isn't over. If this story inspired you, like the video, subscribe to the channel and share it with others. Your voice matters too.